Now, with any aquarium or pond, how much value you get out of it tends to be very much related to how much you enjoy learning about it. So if you've got a feature like this, which is potentially an unbelievable asset to any garden, if you want to just set it up or not worry about it, not learn about it, you'll find that the amount of value you get out of this feature is very much limited to your enjoyment walking past it. On the other hand, if you take a little bit more of an interest in it, learn a little bit more about it, you'll find that you'll identify with it a lot more, you'll enjoy it a lot more, and you'll find it's actually easier and more rewarding. So if I can suggest anything, if you have an aquarium or if you have a pond, just go out of your way to learn a little bit about it. Because the more that you understand the fish, the more you understand the biological processes that occur, the more likely you're going to be successful and the more likely you're going to enjoy it. Especially a feature like this, which is just really something that can make or break your yard. If this is neglected, it can certainly not be the feature that it can be. And so even if it requires getting someone like me to come out and give it a once over, teach you a little bit about it, maybe even inspire you to be a little bit more involved in it. It really is knowledge that makes or breaks these systems, and the more you learn, the more you tend to enjoy. It's the same as all the time people say to me how lucky I am. Oh, you're really lucky that you're doing something that you enjoy. Whereas I'm not sure how lucky that is, or it's really just the more you learn about something, the more you enjoy something. So you'll never see anyone that loves cars and can't tell you all about them. I think that knowledge, the passion is governed by knowledge, and the more you learn, the more you enjoy. So if you stumble across a feature like this one, if you buy a house that's got a pond or a tank in it, learn a little bit about it. You might be surprised how much you end up enjoying it.
Now, the quality of your fish is exactly equal to your water quality and your nutrients. So we can very easily test the water and get a good indication of the performance of the filters and the maintenance routines, which we will do in a minute. But in regards to fish food, the quality of the food is everything. So the two foods that I would very much be going for this pond, or let's say any aquarium or pond for that matter, would be Probiotix from New Life Spectrum. Now, the reason why I'd want that particular food is that the probiotic bacteria in the food is very good for the fish's digestion. But when the fish poo, the bacteria in the poo eats the poo. So it's a really great way of keeping your pond clean. And the other food that I'd be feeding is Danichi. And the reason why I'd want specifically Danichi is because it's a slow-cooked, not completely digestible. It's just basically one of the highest performance foods that I've come across. And I would want to be feeding a nice mix of that. And that way I would get super high quality fish, super good colour, and super clean environment. And what I'm not looking for in my foods is heavily processed, pressure cooked food. I don't want to feed my fish the equivalent of 2-minute noodles or a TV dinner. I want to feed my fish good, holistic, raw state foods. And with these higher quality foods, you're amazed how little you need to feed them. And these fish here at the moment, their condition is actually quite good. So what to feed is half the battle. And the next thing is how much to feed. And ultimately, the thing that matters is the results. So people will give you all of their formulas on what they do to feed their fish. But at the end of the day, if you're looking down on the fish and they're holding a healthy amount of weight, then whatever you're doing is working. The way these fish are right now, they're good. They are not overweight, but on the other hand, they're not too thin. You don't want to go from the gill plate and see it go in. That's going to be too thin, and you don't really want to go from the gill plate and see it really burst out, otherwise that'd be too fat. So the way these fish are at the moment is a very healthy, happy weight. Now you'll see here in a pond, we've got lots of fish, very happy and very visible, and you'll see that there's a bit of a netting of fishing wire over the top. Now this is a very effective way of deterring birds, because the birds tend to not be able to navigate this, and you might have a kookaburra or whatever the fella is that's wanting to bunk a couple of the fish off, and then they end up hitting the fishing line and going in the drink, and it scares the hell out of them. It doesn't hurt them, but it's certainly a deterrent to make them not want to do that again. So that little bit of distraction there is a very good way of making sure that the fish are okay. Now in this pond here, there's a host of goldfish, and I've already seen a few scurry away underneath the bottom there, and these fish don't have that protection afforded to them. So you will find that over time the smart ones have survived and they've learnt to hide underneath here, and the not so smart ones have ended up being bird food. That's a really common situation. So instead of putting a disgusting looking mesh over the top, this is sort of a happy medium in regards to the fact that it does afford the birds some protection, and it doesn't look as horrendous as some of the mesh tops that I've seen people try and do. Now, if you get a lot of algae in your pond, what you really need to be clear about is that there's a battle between bacteria and algae. So, you got fish and they're producing waste. So the first key is to make sure you're feeding very high quality foods, therefore you don't need to feed as much, therefore you don't have as much waste. Now, there's going to be waste nonetheless. So, if we have an environment which is favourable for the bacteria, then we will tend to have a higher redox potential, a higher dissolved oxygen level, and we will tend to get less algae. On the other hand, if the environment is favourable for the algae, then the algae will beat the bacteria, and then you'll have lots of algae. And obviously one of the biggest factors that are very hard to control is the sun. So in reference to a water feature like this is a wonderful way of benefiting our bacteria, because putting the water through these little spouts is going to highly oxygenate the water, which is going to help to raise the dissolved oxygen level, which will help to raise the redox potential and help to disperse CO2. So we want to reduce the CO2 and increase the oxygen in order to allow the bacteria to win over the algae. So the better the water flow, the better the filters, and the better the quality of food, the more chance the bacteria is going to prevail over the algae. And if you are getting algae like this, one of the best things to do is just get it out. It's actually great for the garden. It's full of nutrients, and it's very easy to scoop out and remove. Where possible, scooping out all your algae is much better than trying to use algicides. You're really wanting to be using algicides as a last resort, because all an algicide is essentially going to do is kill off all the algae, then release all the nutrients back into the water again, more than likely allowing the growth of more algae again. So by all means use algicides if you feel like you need to, but where possible, just getting a brush and brushing all that off, grabbing a net, scooping all that out is really your friend, because this algae, this blanket algae, is very easy to remove. Like, it's literally just, you just grab it, just pull it out. Having trouble reaching it at the moment, but it's very easy to get out. And when you get it out, throw it in the garden. Oh, this is exactly what you want. A good old modified fish net, like this. This is your best friend. See, that's Bob's your uncle, this stuff. If you can do this on a semi-regular basis, then what happens is the algae is your friend, because the algae is literally removing all the nutrients, and then you're just scooping it all out, and it's wonderful fertilizer for your garden. It's a real treat for your garden. The other thing to be aware of too is just be conscious of fashion versus function. So in this pond we've got several air stones, which really is quite a good idea. But if it was up to me, I would have the air stones just on the side of the pond, and I'd want to lose this big unnecessary cord. Now, if you find yourself in a situation, especially if your pond's under a residual tree, or if you're getting leaves and flowers into the pond, you really want to regularly scoop them out. Because if you leave these in the pond, though it's not the end of the world, that's going to be a whole heap of nitrate and phosphate, and that's a lot of fuel for your algae. And once again, what we're wanting to do is to create an environment where the bacteria wins, and we're just not going to be able to do that with the too much nutrient going into the water, even if the nutrient is in the form of rotting leaves or flowers or so forth. So scooping them out is really regularly is a really good idea. The other thing we can do to advantage the bacteria is there are products like the water cleanser, and it's like a little waxy ball, and you can throw that in the pond, and then what that does is release what's called hydrocarbons, and this stuff's really cheap and it works really good because the hydrocarbon grows what's called OEMs, or oil eating microorganisms, and these are little organisms that come alive and polish up the water, eat any nutrients out of the water, and then over a period of months that waxy ball just goes in the bin. But you'll find that it's a really good way of just like polishing up your pond. And as with all things that are biological solutions, you'll get one person that will say, look, that worked an absolute treat, and you'll get someone else to say that didn't do as well as they wished. And there's a whole lot of reasons why that may be the case, such as how many OEMs are in the environment in the first place, which is something that we don't know. So giving that waterfall a clean with a brush would really be a good thing, but just being conscious of good water flow, good oxygen, and trying to make sure that bacteria wins the war.